Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. How are you all doing, gang? We're nearly at the end of 2020. We've survived. I feel like we almost should be wearing a t-shirt saying that we survived 2020. Now, the world of finance has especially got a bad rap recently, especially for being slow to react to technological change, but thankfully that is changing. But if you have ever had the misfortune of being missed off the weekly or monthly payroll, or your overtime is missing, a whole world of lengthy phone calls and promises that often fail to materialise. In fact, a whole world of pain awaits. But it feels so difficult to understand when we're living in a world of instant payments. If you go out for a meal with your friend, you can just transfer the money in an instant. And yet in a corporate environment, you're often greeted with, you'll have to wait till next month. So there has to be a better way. In fact, there should be much more flexibility than a monthly wage. For example, some people would prefer to be paid weekly, fortnightly, and monthly. We are all unique individuals with unique circumstances. So when I recently discovered a story of a Fintech provider called DailyPay, I felt compelled to find out more because they're enabling employees to receive their paychecks as they earn them. And DailyPay is an application that employers can implement at zero cost to provide their employees with the benefit of increased financial flexibility. And they also recently waived next day fees to empower frontline workers during this incredibly difficult year. I love everything that they've set out to do here, solving real problems, helping people, providing personalisation and flexibility, and helping people with technology. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to New York, where Jason Lee, CEO and founder of DailyPay, is waiting to speak with us now. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Jason. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
You bet. Well, Neil, it is a privilege to be here. We are huge fans of the podcast. And if you'd asked me, 4 years ago when we started DailyPay, if I thought I would be someone who would be an authority, I guess, on entrepreneurship or technology, I would have said you're crazy. But, here we are. So I appreciate it. And I'm thrilled to be able to spend a few minutes with you here. So I'm the CEO of a company called DailyPay, which is a company that I founded back in early 2016. And we are based in New York. We're not yet over where you are yet, but we're based out here in New York. And what we do is we offer a product to employers, which allows their employees to be able to control the timing of their pay. We've created this industry called on-demand pay, which is exactly what you might think it is, in the same way that you've got on-demand, Ubers or on-demand, food delivery. This is really on-demand pay. It's an ability through a digital, frictionless, highly mobile experience to simply be able to control exactly when it is that you get paid for the hours that you've already worked. And so that's kind of what we do for a living here in a nutshell. We started the company a few years ago, and it's just been an incredible ride since we started it. There's been tremendous growth, not only in terms of the underlying number of employees that are on our system, which totals kind of in the millions at this point, but we work with some of the largest and most significant employers in the country, whether that be a Kroger or a Target or a Dollar Tree. These are all the biggest employers in the United States who have really decided that this is a benefit that would truly help their employees.
Well, first of all, a huge thank you for the kind words about the podcast. And there wouldn't be a podcast with people like you taking the time to come on here and share your story. And for anyone listening that are tuning in to us today and hearing about DailyPay for the first time, could you just set the scene and tell the listeners a little bit more about exactly what DailyPay is and the kind of problems that you set out to solve with technology?
Sure. Well, let me maybe paint the backdrop here a little bit more broadly and the environment that we kind of live in today. So, as you know, Neil, the idea of personal financial management or kind of money transfer or financial services, all of those things are in this huge digital transformation. As you know, it was only a couple of years ago that if you and I went out to the pub for a pint, I'd kind of fork over a few bills and say thanks for buying me a beer. Well, how do we do that today? I probably go home and then I just Venmo you the cash, or maybe I'll use Square Cash and just digitally send it to you. Money today, it moves instantly, it moves effortlessly across the system. And most importantly, it moves in a highly controlled way by me. I get to decide when it is that I send you those funds. And at the minute I decide to send you those funds, you receive them. And there's almost a seamless experience as it relates to that experience at this point. If I think about our bank accounts, in the old days, I would have to maybe go to the ATM machine to see what my bank balance was, or maybe I'd have to go into the bank branch to kind of do a transaction. Well, today, all of that's done digitally, frictionlessly. It's all done through mobile application. And so the experience with my financial services has dramatically changed in a very, very short period of time. One of the areas that's sort of been left behind, candidly, has been the area of pay. In the US, at least, most employers pay once every 2 weeks. And in Europe, and certainly in most of the UK, they pay once a month. If you think about that experience, it really doesn't resemble, it really does not comport with the experience that we have today in every other aspect of consumer financial services. As I said, I can Venmo you for a pint of beer. I can go onto my mobile app and deposit a check or do other types of banking services. The irony is payroll is fundamentally the origination point for a lot of the money that sits in my bank account. And yet, here we are in an environment where that still happens in a highly analog and static way. It happens once every 2 weeks, once a month, despite the fact that I'm earning my pay, every single hour that I work. So that's kind of the backdrop where we said, hey, shouldn't we modernize and shouldn't we create a more digital experience for really one of the most core functions out there, which is that of the employee experience with pay. So that's kind of, the starting point of the company, which was, gosh, how do we make the experience that employees have with their pay look a little bit more like the experience they have today with every other part of their financial life? Well, there's a second part of the story, Neil, which is the employer experience. Obviously employees want to control the timing of their pay as they would with every other financial service. The problem is employers have to pay cost or have a lot of operational burden when they actually run payroll. Frankly, that's why they don't run payroll every day to begin with. They actually want to limit the number of times they run payroll because, frankly, it costs them money when they actually do it. And so therein lies this conflict. We have a party who wants their money every day. They want to control it. They want to have full access to it. But we have another party who is motivated or incentivized to drag out that process as long as possible. And as I'm sure, Neil, that is a classic example of where a technology solution can effectively bridge those two gaps. And so what we do is we allow and create technology which enables the employee to control every aspect of their pay without changing any aspect of the employer's payroll cycle. The employer simply runs payroll as they always have, once every 2 weeks, once a month. In some cases, they don't even change their funding cycle or their operational cycle or their internal approvals process. It's almost as if we don't even exist. And that's really the magic of our technology. How do we create a DailyPay experience for the employee while not changing the payroll experience for the employer.
I love that. And I must admit, before you came on today, I kind of assumed that in the US, you were paid every month, not every 2 weeks. But I do think one thing, no matter where anybody's listening to this podcast today, is I think most HR teams and payroll teams are kind of looking to provide employees with a greater flexibility and almost a personalized service, because we are all unique individuals. So it's got so many great aspects to it here. But before you did come on, I did do a little bit of research, and I also read that you had the idea for DailyPay one night when ordering a pizza delivery. Is that true? And if it is, can you share that story?
Sure. Well, confession, I love pizza. And even though I live in New York City, which is, again, home of so many great restaurants and so many great pizzerias, here's my second confession. My favorite pizza place is Domino's Pizza. So big plug there for Domino's Pizza. Anyways, so look, I'll try to tell the story in 60 seconds or less. Essentially, I was ordering pizza one night, and as you know, most of us here in big cities and really all across the country at this point, order through these delivery apps. You go onto a third party delivery app, and you look for your favorite restaurant and you order the meal. And so one night I was just on the delivery app. It was an app here in New York, and what I noticed was Domino's was nowhere to be found. And I said, my goodness, I really want Domino's Pizza, and this app wasn't listing Domino's Pizza, and I was annoyed. I had to call up the Domino's location myself, and life moved on. But sort of every night since that night, or when I had that experience, I just kept on having this nagging thought, Neil. I kept on saying, why isn't Domino's listed on this app? So I finally, weeks later, I went to the pub across the street from my apartment, and I asked the owner, Joe. He's a friend of mine. I said, "Hey, Joe, let me read your delivery app merchant agreement. Your third-party delivery app merchant agreement." And when I read the merchant agreement, I discovered, wait a minute. This looks like you're not getting paid for the consumer's order for about a month. And I said, isn't that killing your business? I said, wait, I pay for it. I, as the diner or the consumer, I know that my credit card's being charged, but this app is not giving you those funds for about a month. Doesn't that really impact your business? And Joe said, yeah, unfortunately it does. I have to go buy the ingredients. I have to cook the food. I have to, hire the delivery person, service the order. I'm doing all this work, and then I'm not really getting paid for it for about a month. And from that moment, I started to pull on that thread, Neil. And I kind of said, well, what else is like that? That's a big problem. And that eventually led me to the concept of payroll. We work every day. And when we work, we earn the right to receive money from our employer. But our employer is really not making good on that right until the, quote, payday. And the problem that creates for so many Americans, and frankly, so many people across the world, is they actually really do need that money today. And it's their money. They've earned it. They've already earned it. Frankly, if they quit today, just because the payday hasn't occurred, they don't forego those funds. No, of course not. They would actually get, their final paycheck. They earn, or they're entitled to receive what they've earned up to that moment in time. And so that got me thinking really broadly around, how do we solve this issue? So many people are living paycheck to paycheck. And yet the technology doesn't exist to allow an employer to be able to offer this to their employees. Again, the key issue here is employers don't want to do anything that resembles running payroll more frequently. And so the technology solution that had to be created was one that did all of that work behind the scenes. How do we replicate the experience of an employee being able to access her pay whenever she wants without touching the employer experience of having them run payroll once, every 2 weeks or once a month? So that's kind of where the story came from. That's the idea behind the company. And a lot's happened, obviously, since that night of ordering pizza. But yeah, that's kind of the founding moment for the company.
I think it's also worth highlighting that since your inception in 2015, DailyPay has partnered with over 250 big name companies. And just a few of those are household names such as Kroger, Burger King, Vera Bradley, Sprinkles Cupcakes, to name but a few, all to provide employees with that real-time access and access to earned pay that we've just been talking about. But do you have any other use cases that would just help listeners understand how people could control their earnings to better save, spend, and invest, and how it would work in their world?
Yeah. So look, we've got a ton, but let me just give you one that I think will probably blow your mind, Neil, and then blow the minds of your users. Of your listeners. We all want to save money, and all of us want to save more out of our paycheck for the future, maybe a splurge purchase, maybe for, educational needs, whatever it might be. But all of us want to save more money. One of the issues, however, that plagues a lot of workers is once that money gets into their bank account, it magically disappears. I'm sure you've had this experience. Oh, well, I really need to take care of this issue, or, okay, let me just kind of maybe go out to eat and do this, and then I'll start savings. All of a sudden, a couple of days goes by, there's no more money in the bank account, and now you can't save. And that's really been one of the issues that has plagued and has caused a lot of people to have struggles with savings. What if you could save, however, money that you haven't even received yet?
Wow.
So one more time, what if I allowed you to save money, to put savings away for money that you haven't even yet received? That's kind of what we do.
Consider my mind blown there. Yeah.
Yes. We've completely changed the order of these operations, and that's really to drive customer value. We want these users to save. We want them to be people who could move up the income bracket. We want them to have complete and utter control over their financial lives. And we know that, sometimes life just gets in between, our best intentions and what actually occurs. And so part of this is, how do you leverage technology to create an experience? I want to save today, but I don't have those monies yet. Yeah, but the problem is, once that money gets there, it always disappears. Great. I've got a great idea for you. We're going to help you save even before you get that money. We're going to put that money aside. And that's what we're getting at, is how do you create this real-time experience, which enables the employee or the consumer to create profound differences in her life? That consumer, we're helping her save $1 or $2 every week. Well, let me tell you, after a couple of months, she's got $100 saved. There's no way she could have ever imagined her putting that money away if she did it the old-fashioned way.
And as this is a tech podcast, I've got to ask, can you tell me a little bit more about the technology that makes all this possible, without revealing too much of your secret sauce, of course?
Well, look, we are a financial technology company, or I guess, a Fintech company. And so it is amazing combination of a number of different disciplines that the technology actually embeds. I mean, if you look at our leadership team, you'd kind of scratch your head. Our leaders are from a really weird combination of disciplines. We've got some Wall Street types, financial engineers. Then we've got some folks from the human capital management industry, so like the payroll industry or HR industry. And then we have software developers. Like, we've got this very weird combination, because this product or the service that we've built, it leverages disciplines and domain expertise from finance and financial engineering, from the most sophisticated Wall Street style financial engineering structuring work, to, hey, human capital management. We're fixing HR issues. We're fixing payroll problems, to software engineering and software development, which then makes us scalable, and which is really where all the secret sauce exists. I think what I would tell you, or tell your listeners, is we've essentially created a full end-to-end payment processing engine for an entirely new class of payments. We are essentially creating a payment processing engine that lives right next door to the core payroll process. If you think about the way money typically travels, the sender originates money, they then fund that, and then it goes through some rail system and it winds up at the recipient. That's kind of what we know as classic payment processing. In our market, we've kind of flipped it on its head. What our technology does is we originate those payments, we send it through some rails, it gets to some recipient who has a relationship with the original sender, who, by the way, still hasn't done anything, the employer. And then our technology seamlessly is able to redirect the payment from the employer back to us for the payment that we've already sent. And we do that in a highly scalable, frictionless, compliant, all of those things that we need to do to be able to be servicing millions of consumers across the United States. So that's a little bit of how you can think about our tech. It is this, we've completely redesigned an end-to-end payment processing flow for the payroll process by flipping that on its head and changing the order of how the actual money moves.
Incredibly cool. And before you came on the podcast today, Jason, I did also do a little bit of research and I noticed that DailyPay recently released some industry-specific data that demonstrates just everything that we talked about today and how the workforce has shifted due to the pandemic. But I'm curious, can you share some of those insights from that data?
Yeah. So, when the pandemic started, we knew that people not only associate DailyPay with, quote, on-demand pay or consumer payments. They really think of us as an authority and a thought leader in just work and workforce management. Because so much of what we do, Neil, is we fundamentally alter the relationship between the employer and the employee. Never before has an employee been able to have all of her financial needs met through one single source, her employer. And so people think about us as, okay, those guys, they deepen the bond between the employer and the employee. They're all about that workforce management, not simply about payments and whatnot. So that's backdrop to, we started studying the impact of the pandemic and frankly, publishing our research and sharing that with the broad community. And we called it our Different series. Our first study was, quote, it was called Pay Different. What is the changing perception of employees as it relates to how they consume their pay? We then released a study called Work Different. What are the changing attitudes of employees on the world of work? And our third in the series is called Hire Different. Okay, how are people hiring differently given the pandemic? And so as it relates to the most recent, or I think what you're referring to around Work Different, it was all around just the changing attitudes of the workforce. And, obviously 2020 has been an incredibly eventful year on so many different topics. But we just wanted to get a sense of, hey, is your view of the workplace changing? Is it changing since the pandemic has started? Here's an incredible stat: 6 out of 10, so 60% of folks said that, for example, diversity in company leadership is a critical factor when deciding on where to apply for a job. 63% said that female leaders in a company is an extraordinary benefit for business. 59% said that not only across the leadership group, but just in the core workforce. 59% said that just having a core diverse workforce is a great thing for business. And so I think the studies you're referring to are just kind of these broad industry topics around kind of how is the world of work changing? And we really tend to over-index in that area, in addition to offering technology which changes that environment.
And it has been an eventful year, like you said there. And there is this feeling that we're all in this together, no matter where you are in the world. And I did read that DailyPay recently waived next day fees to empower frontline workers during a turbulent time such as this. So kudos for you guys for doing that and stepping up. But can you expand on that story?
Well, look, when the pandemic started, I think all of us, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school, all of us realized who is really essential versus not.
Yeah.
And I think, and I'm going to bet that many of us did not think that some of those now that we call essential workers weren't really that essential, right? So it was clear that frontline workers, obviously healthcare workers, but folks who were working hard, staffing the folks who are actually resupplying the toilet paper, at the grocery store or in the supply chain center, the folks, the hardworking women and men who are knocking on your door with that food delivery. These are all these essential workers that were identified at the beginning of the pandemic. And we just said, you know what? We work with a lot of these folks. They need more than ever to be able to control the timing of their pay. So we just waive fees, for an extended period of time. In the US, our shelter in place was probably in place here for about a month and a half. And during that period so for about 3 months, we just waive fees and, for a core part of our product. And that was really not only a thank you, but it was more because we so believe in this mission of impacting and driving growth and really empowering the lives of the American worker, in particular, those who are essential. And so whether you were a grocery stocker at Kroger, a cashier at Target, a stock person at the distribution center of a Dollar Tree, someone who's helping out a customer at Tractor Supply, you name it, you were able to access the product at no cost.
And I think so much has changed this year. And I think traditional processes and ways of working have all been transformed. And COVID has almost been a digital accelerant of sorts. But I'm curious, do you think that traditional monthly payroll or fortnightly payroll system is beginning to look outdated in this digital age and on-demand world that we're living in now?
Well, look, I think the market's telling us something.
Yeah.
We were a no-name startup a few years ago, and now we work with 80% of the Fortune 100 who offers this product. That is telling us something. It's telling us that there is profound demand for this type of product, both at the employer as well as the employee level. Neil, it's a little bit like this. If you think that we are stopping at cruise control and that self-driving cars is not on its way, you're crazy. If you think that technology is not happening. Now, we can debate who would provide it or who would use it. But if you think that technology is not an inexorable, unstoppable force that is pushing forward, we have an expression here at DailyPay. One of our core values is move the line. If you don't think that technology is not moving the line forward, you're crazy. And in the same way, yes, a few million people in the United States out of 131 million working adults, it ain't every working American yet. But I'll tell you, the toothpaste is out of the tube. This is coming. It's unstoppable. And self-driving payroll, is only a few blocks away.
Love that. So much to think about there. And it has been a turbulent year, as we've discussed, but we're all on the verge of entering 2021. So I've got to ask, what excites you about the role that technology will play in upgrading that old system and ways of doing things? And what role do you see DailyPay playing in that future?
I think the key piece from a technology standpoint is, we're not a payroll company. What we are is a piece of technology that makes a great payroll system better. We make that system the best version of itself, because fundamentally, it's kind of like this. No one goes to AT&T and says, "Hey, I'd like to see your latest 8-part series, on chess." No one expects AT&T to produce the Queen's Gambit. No, we go to Netflix for that. But Netflix is relying on streaming networks, that underground are being provided in the pipes are being provided by great technology that an AT&T or a Verizon or, you name it, in Orange or, whoever you're using over there, is providing. So there's a partnership. There's an ecosystem whereby services are being provided on top of other services. Another great example I'll give you is, there's a reason why Uber fundamentally changed the ride experience without building a car. I don't think you've ever seen Uber build a single car, but yet they have satisfied what cars do. What do cars do? They bring you from point A to point B, but they fundamentally change that experience through technology. And so I guess the point that I'm getting at is there's always going to be a place for the car manufacturer. But in a world where experience is everything, consumer control is everything, how do you insert technology layers, these micro thin layers that exist between that end consumer and, the OEM to effectively alter that experience?
Well, I've loved chatting with you today, Jason. And for anyone listening that would like to continue the conversation that we've started here and find out more information about you, about DailyPay, or even contact a member of your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Just go to our website, and we are always happy to have a one-on-one discussion. So just go to our website. You'll see our contact info there. Neil, let me say it again. You do an amazing show here. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I feel humbled, and I feel like I've accomplished something here. So I appreciate being invited to come on.
No, thank you. Because like we've talked here, we are all living in this on-demand world now, and it only makes sense that our pay should be given to us in the same way, and given that flexibility to workers who need to pay their bills and manage their savings in incredibly difficult times. So I love what you're doing here. I always say at the end of every episode that technology works best when it brings people together. And I think this is what you're doing here with DailyPay too. So I'd love to stay in touch with you. And if I'm ever allowed to fly again, hopefully we can meet in person at a tech conference like the good old days. But more than anything, thanks for sharing your story with me today, Jason.
Thank you again, Neil. All the best.
What a great guy. Jason did have to dash for another call at the end of this interview, but I would have loved to chat to him for a little bit longer there after we finished. So I've added him to my growing list of cool guys I'd love to grab a cold beer with. And if I am allowed to fly in 2021, it's going to be an expensive year. I've got quite a long beer tab here. But seriously, on-demand pay has become a necessity now rather than a luxury in recent years, especially when we consider the pandemic. And employers have the responsibility almost to support their employees' financial health with flexibility in managing their own funds, especially during these unprecedented times. Food for thought. And I think this year everything has been turned on its head, and we're starting to think differently and approach problems differently and question the old way of doing things. And for me, that can only be a great thing. So please let me know your thoughts, insights, experiences, anything at all, questions. If you want to come on the podcast, email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, but keep those messages coming in. Don't just connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Send me a little message. Tell me you listen to the podcast, because that's why I do this. And wherever I go, I will always say, hey, I'm going to be in this location, and I'll invite a past guest or a listener to this show to have a chat and meet in person. That is what this podcast is all about. But I'm afraid we've already reached the end of this episode, so I'm going to make myself a drink, have a nice sit down, and prepare for tomorrow's interview. I hope you'll join me again. If not, don't worry. But thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.